So I was looking at the Billboard Hot 100 chart from August 1988 the other day.
Oh, wow. The late 80s.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very weird snapshot of time.
I can only imagine.
You have, you know, George Michael with Monkey right up there. You have Guns N' Roses doing Sweet Child O' Mine.
Good lesson.
You have Steve Winwood. I mean, it is peak, unadulterated late 80s energy. Hairspray, synthesizers, the whole deal.
Right, the real MTV era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then sitting right there at number 11, literally sandwiched right between all of that modern, glossy 80s production.
Oh.
There's this track that sounds like it fell out of a time machine.
Oh, absolutely.
It's raw. It's completely mono. The drums sound like, I don't know, cardboard boxes, but in the absolute best way possible.
Yes.
And the guy singing sounds like he is just shredding his vocal cords for dear life.
It really is an anomaly on that chart. Usually, when you see a really old song pop up on a modern chart like that, it's because someone died.
Right, a tribute bump.
Yeah, or maybe it was featured in a massive car commercial or something. But this was different. This wasn't just some brief nostalgia trip. It was a full-blown resurrection of a track.
We are talking, of course, about Do You Love Me by The Contours.
The one and only.
And I think for most people out there listening, myself included, honestly, this song is sort of audio wallpaper.
Audio wallpaper. That's a good way to describe it.
You know it. Everyone knows it. You hear that opening spoken word bit, the "you broke my heart," and you instantly know exactly what is coming next.
Right, the explosion of the drums.
But until we started digging into this stack of research for today, I had absolutely no idea that this song is, well, it's basically the Forrest Gump of music history.
It really is.
It just keeps showing up at these massive pivotal moments across decades.
That is a great way to put it, because it's a song that managed to be a huge, massive hit in the early 60s. And then
It completely takes over the UK.
Exactly. It became the center of this really vicious battle between bands during the British invasion. And then, as you noted with the 1988 chart, it came back to life nearly 30 years later to sit right next to Guns N' Roses.
It's just wild. So here is the plan for this deep dive. For everyone listening, we're going to fully trace the life cycle of this track.
From birth to rebirth.
Right. We're going to use an incredible stack of sources today. We've got historical chart data from Billboard, we've got interviews and quotes from Berry Gordy Jr. himself, plus brilliant analysis from music critics like Dave Marsh and musicologists like Andrew Flory.
We really have a great roadmap of sources for this one.
We do. And the mission today is to figure out how this happened. We need to go back to the very beginning, to this frantic, desperate recording session at Hitsville, USA.
Because we have to explain why this song was basically an accident.
Very happy accident.
It's the happiest of accidents.
And we're going to get deep into the battle of the covers in the UK, which I found this part so fascinating because I had no idea how totally cutthroat the music business was over there in 1963.
Oh, it was brutal. Absolute warfare.
And finally, we will land on the movie Dirty Dancing and how that film changed everything for a group of guys who literally thought their music career was dead and buried.
It's a great narrative arc.
But we have to start with the man himself.
Berry Gordy Jr.
The boss. The architect of Motown. Now, usually when we talk about Berry Gordy on a deep dive, we talk about him as this astute businessman. The guy who built the assembly line of hits in Detroit.
Right, the quality control meetings, the pristine operation.
But the origin of Do You Love Me isn't about some grand business strategy. It's actually about deep personal insecurity.
It is, and it's actually quite charming when you strip away the massive Motown legend and just look at the man.
Yeah.
Gordy was a songwriter at his core, and he always maintained that the best songs come from truth. They come from real life. And in this case, the truth was that back in his younger days, he couldn't get dates.
Wait, I still can't get over this. The guy who founded Motown, the coolest label on earth, couldn't get a date.
Well, not the specific dates he really wanted. He was actually quite explicit about this in the source material. He noted that writing the concept and the lyrics for this song was the easiest thing in the world for him.
Because he lived it.
Exactly. He just tapped right into his memory of being a young guy standing at parties. He would see a girl he liked across the room, but he couldn't approach her because he couldn't dance.
The classic wallflower syndrome.
Precisely. In the late 50s and early 60s, you have to remember, dancing was the primary currency of social interaction for teenagers.
You couldn't do the moves. You were stuck on the sideline.
You were invisible. So this song, Do You Love Me, is essentially a massive wish fulfillment fantasy for Gordy.
Oh, I see.
The protagonist of the song is saying to this girl, "Remember when you totally ignored me? Well, look at me now."
That perfectly explains why the lyrics are basically just a checklist of very specific dance crazes from the 1960s.
Right.
I mean, he literally sings, I can do the mashed potato, I can do the twist.
It's not poetry, it's a resume.
A dancing resume.
Yes. He is proving his romantic worth entirely through dance. And that theme, the idea of bridging the gap between being uncool and being cool through sheer physical movement, that is the core DNA of the song. It is exactly what makes it work so universally.
Okay, so Gordy has this anthem. He's written this wish fulfillment song, and he is the head of the label, so he can literally pick anyone in his stable to sing it.
Anyone he wants.
And he has a very specific group in mind. He doesn't want just anyone. He wants the Temptations.
This is one of the absolute biggest what-ifs in all of Motown history.
But let's pause on the Temptations for just a second, because if you're listening to this, you're picturing the icons. But in 1962, they weren't the superstar Temptations yet, were they?
Not at all.
They weren't the guys in the flawless matching suits doing the perfect choreography.
No, in 1962, they were actually really struggling. Around Hitsville, they were mockingly known as the Hit List Temptations.
That is so harsh.
The industry is tough. They had released a few singles already, but absolutely nothing had cracked the top 40.
So they had the talent, but no traction.
Exactly. They were incredibly polished, their harmonies were gorgeous, but they just hadn't connected with the record-buying public yet.
So Gordy writes this song, and he sees Do You Love Me as their golden ticket. This is going to be the breakout hit for the Hit List Temptations.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
He creates this energetic vehicle specifically for them. He goes down to the recording studio at Hitsville to grab them to cut the track.
And they aren't there.
They are completely missing.
This is the part of the story from the sources that I find absolutely hilarious. You have the boss of the company, Berry Gordy, holding what he knows is a smash hit record, wandering around looking for his artists, and they have basically vanished.
Gone without a trace.
So where were they?
They were at church.
At church, on a recording day.
Yes. But they weren't just there for a regular Sunday service. They had actually gone to a local gospel showcase in Detroit to see some real heavy hitters in the gospel world.
Who are they seeing?
The sources are specific on this. They went to see the Dixie Hummingbirds, the Harmonizing Four, and the Swan Silvertones.
Okay, I know those names are absolute giants in the gospel world, but for a listener who might not be deep into gospel history, how big of a deal was this showcase? Was it really worth skipping out on the boss?
Oh, in the context of black music in Detroit in 1962, absolutely.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The Dixie Hummingbirds, just as one example, were total legends. They were essentially the rock stars of the gospel circuit.
Rock stars in robes.
Exactly. They were known for this incredibly hard-driving vocal style and their intense showmanship. If you were an up-and-coming vocal group like the Temptations, going to watch the Dixie Hummingbirds was like attending a masterclass.
So they weren't just playing hooky.
No, you went there to steal moves, you went to carefully study how they structured their intricate harmonies, you went to learn how to completely control and work a live crowd.
So it was professional development, technically speaking.
You could definitely argue that, but the irony of the situation is just delicious.
It really is. Here is Berry Gordy holding this piece of paper with a song entirely about secular pleasures.
Yeah.
It's about dancing, shaking it down, getting the girl, romance. And the guys he desperately wants to sing it are off somewhere soaking in deep spiritual gospel music.
It's this perfect collision of the sacred versus the secular happening right there in an empty hallway at Hitsville, USA.
So Gordy is impatient. He wants to cut this record right now while the inspiration is hot.
He was not a man who liked to wait.
And because the Temptations are a church, history pivots.
Yeah.
Who does he physically run into in the studio?
He runs right into the Contours.
Now let's talk about the Contours. Because if the Temptations were the Hit List Temptations, the Contours were in even worse shape, right?
No, the Contours were in the extreme danger zone.
How bad was it?
Very bad. They were a much rougher group than the Temptations. They absolutely did not have that silky, smooth elegance, and their track record at the label was terrible.
They had already released stuff, right?
Yes, their first two singles, one was called Whole Lotta Woman and the other was called The Stretch, and both of them had completely stiffed. They didn't chart at all.
And in the Motown singles business of 1962, 2 strikes is a massive deal.
2 strikes usually means you're out. They were genuinely deeply afraid that they were about to be dropped from the label entirely.
So when they awkwardly bumped into Gordy in the hall, why were they even in the building?
They were actually booked at the studio to record a totally different song. They were scheduled to cut a track called It Must Be Love.
It Must Be Love. I have never heard of that song in my life.
Exactly. Nobody has. Because history completely intervened. Gordy sees them standing there and he basically says, forget whatever you're doing. I need you to go in there and try this song instead.
Imagine the pure pressure of that moment.
It's terrifying.
You are literally about to get fired. The boss is visibly frustrated because his favorite group is missing. And he hands you a sheet of lyrics you have never seen before and basically says, make this a hit right now.
And we have to be clear, it wasn't instant magic.
It wasn't.
No, that's the part of the legend people always gloss over. They didn't just walk into the booth, read it once, and nail it in one take.
Oh, I always sort of assumed they just blasted it out.
Not at all. Gordy was a notoriously demanding perfectionist. He worked them incredibly hard on this track. He kept pushing and pushing them for a very specific, frantic vocal delivery.
Let's talk about that vocal delivery. Because when you actually sit and listen to the record today, the lead singer, that's Billy Gordon, right?
Yes, Billy Gordon.
He sounds like he is physically exploding.
He does.
It's not pretty singing at all. It's not crooning. It is this intense, I am desperate and I am begging you kind of singing.
That is the absolute key to the whole song. In fact, Joe Billingsley, who was one of the other singers in the Contours, he gave an interview back in 2009 where he reflected on this exact session.
What did he say?
He said, and I think he is 100% right about this, that the Temptations could not have sung this song.
Really? Why not? I mean, they're the Temptations. They're legendary vocalists. They can sing anything.
They could sing anything beautifully. But Do You Love Me isn't supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to be raucous. It inherently requires a certain level of grit, a complete lack of polish.
And the Temptations were just too refined for that.
Exactly. They were too smooth, too tall, too elegant. If the Temptations had sung the lyric, Do You Love Me, it might have sounded like a very polite romantic request.
Excuse me, miss. Would you care to dance?
Right. But when the Contours sang it, it sounded like a vital demand. It sounded urgent.
It's the stark difference between asking someone for a dance and begging them for a dance, as if your life depends on it.
Precisely. The Contours naturally had that rough-around-the-edges, street corner quality, and that completely matched the frantic, desperate energy of Gordy's lyrics.
Because they were actually desperate.
They were literally fighting for their careers inside that vocal booth, and you can hear every ounce of that sweat on the record.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And you know, we can't give all the credit just to the vocalists here. We really have to talk about the engine room of the song.
The Funk Brothers.
The Funk Brothers.
For the uninitiated listener, who exactly are we listening to playing the instruments on this track?
You are listening to, quite literally, the absolute best session musicians in the world at that specific moment in time.
The Motown House Band.
Yes. On piano, you have Joe Hunter. On the drums, you have Benny Benjamin. And if you go listen to the song, just pay attention to that opening drum fill.
Oh, it's thunderous.
It sounds like an avalanche. And then, of course, you have James Jamerson on the bass guitar.
Jamerson is always the one everyone talks about when we discuss Motown.
And for very good reason. Jamerson fundamentally changed how the bass was played in pop music. He didn't just sit there and play the standard root notes.
He played actual melodies.
He played melody. He played complex rhythm. On Do You Love Me, he is completely locking in with Benny Benjamin's drums to create this driving, relentless pulse that just pushes the song forward.
And the room they recorded in contributed to that sound too, right?
Definitely. This was all recorded down in what they called the Snake Pit.
The basement at Hitsville. Yes. It was small, it was cramped, it was hot. The sound literally bounced off the walls. That is a huge part of why the record sounds so wildly alive today.
It's not some sterile modern studio.
No, it sounds exactly like a chaotic, sweaty party happening in a basement.
So they finally get the take. Gordy is happy with the desperation. They press it and release it in 1962. What happens next?
It absolutely explodes.
Immediate hit.
Very quickly. It ends up selling over 1 million copies. It shoots up to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 on October 20th, 1962.
Number 3 for a group that was about to be dropped.
Incredible turnaround. But even more importantly for the Motown label financially, it hit number 1 on the Billboard R&B singles chart.
And it wasn't just an American hit either. Our sources show it went international right away.
It did. It charted in Canada. It hit number 2 on the CHRM chart and number 3 on CFUN. It went to number 6 in New Zealand. It even charted over in Belgium.
A global smash. But, talking about those specific Billboard charts, the Hot 100 versus the R&B chart, this brings up a really fascinating point from our sources about the concept of musical genre in the early 60s.
Yes, the way music was categorized was incredibly rigid and frankly very racially coded.
I want to dig into this quote from Berry Gordy that was in the research. I found it really striking. He was giving an interview to Billboard magazine in 1963, so he's reflecting on the massive success of Do You Love Me just a year later. Can you break down what he said?
It is a truly fascinating piece of music history. So Gordy is talking to Billboard, and he says, quote, "It was recorded R&B, but by the time it reached the 500,000 mark, it was considered pop. And if we hadn't recorded it with a Negro artist, it would have been considered rock and roll."
I mean, that is a lot to unpack in one
It
sentence.
really is.
He is basically saying out loud that the genre label of a song depended entirely on the race of the artist and the sheer volume of sales, and had almost nothing to do with the actual sonic qualities of the music.
That is exactly what he's saying, and he was 100% right. You have to remember, in 1962, the American music industry was still heavily segregated in how it categorized and marketed things.
Right.
R&B rhythm and blues was essentially just industry code for black music, and pop was industry code for white music, or more specifically, music that white teenagers are actively buying.
So when Gordy points out that it miraculously became pop once it hit the 500,000 sales mark,
He means it successfully crossed over. White teenagers started buying the record in massive numbers, and once the sales volume hit that undeniable threshold, the predominantly white music industry decided, okay, we can't ignore this. This is pop now.
but the last part of his comment, the part about rock and roll, that's the most telling to me.
If we hadn't recorded it with a Negro artist, it would have been considered rock and roll.
Yeah, because if you just step back and listen to the song objectively today,
It's loud, it's aggressive.
it's got a guy literally screaming his lungs out over these pounding, distorted drums.
Musically, structurally, culturally, it is absolutely a rock and roll record.
But simply because it was performed by the Contours, a black vocal group, and released on Motown, a black-owned label, it was immediately boxed in as R&B.
Exactly. Gordy was acutely aware that these industry labels were just arbitrary boxes designed to keep his artists in a specific lane.
And he wanted them in every lane.
He wanted to be the sound of young America, period. Dave Marsh, the famous music journalist, he actually wrote about this specific song later on, didn't he?
Yeah, Dave Marsh completely backs Gordy up on this. Marsh calls Do You Love Me, quote, classic rock and roll.
There you go.
Marsh argues that this track perfectly represents Berry Gordy's absolute genius, not just as a sharp businessman, but as a hands-on producer and arranger. Gordy created a massive rock anthem that totally defined the R&B label, even if the industry in 1962 wasn't quite ready to admit it out loud.
It just shows you how much deep cultural politics is hidden inside a simple 3-minute dance track.
It's never just about the music. There's always a bigger story.
Always.
Oh, speaking of the song structure itself, we should quickly touch on that spoken word intro.
The famous intro.
Right. It starts with this dramatic recitation. You broke my heart because I couldn't dance. It's so theatrical.
But it works. It perfectly establishes the whole narrative arc right up front.
It really does. It sets the stakes. The protagonist is returning. He's learned how to, quote-unquote, shake him down, and now he's demanding his love back. It's brilliant songwriting economy.
It hooks you instantly before the beat even drops.
Okay, so we've established the Detroit origin story, but to really understand the global impact of this song, we need to move across the Atlantic Ocean.
Ah, yes.
Because while the Contours were celebrating their totally unexpected victory in Detroit, this little 45 RPM record was making its way over to England. And this is where the story gets really, really messy.
The British invasion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We always tend to think of the British invasion as this one-way street, right? The Beatles coming to America, playing Ed Sullivan, conquering the world.
But before that ever happened, the British bands were completely obsessed with American records.
They're basically importing these Motown and Chess Records discs, studying them like holy texts, and then covering them.
They were aggressively mining the American R&B catalogs. You really have to put yourself in the shoes of a young British musician in, say, early 1963.
Okay.
American R&B was the absolute holy grail. It sounded exotic, it was incredibly exciting, and most importantly, it was actually quite hard to physically get your hands on in the UK.
Right, you had to find a merchant marine who brought it over or something.
Exactly. So if you were a local band and you managed to find a great American B-side or a minor R&B hit, you immediately covered it and put it in your live set list to stand out.
And a song like Do You Love Me was totally perfect for that environment.
It's incredibly high energy. It's guaranteed to get a crowded pub moving.
So enter a band called Brian Poole and the Tremeloes,
Brian Poole and the Tremeloes, they were signed to Decca Records.
which is famous for being the label that rejected the Beatles.
Exactly. Decca signed the Tremeloes instead. And by mid-1963, the Tremeloes were desperately looking for their next big hit. They had actually just had some pretty major success with a cover version of Twist and Shout.
Twist and Shout seems to be the ultimate blueprint here.
It really is the inciting incident for all of this. Twist and Shout proved to the British labels that the kids over there desperately wanted that raucous, shouting American dance music.
So they needed a follow-up.
Yes. So the Tremeloes found the Contours album, which, by the way, Motown has smartly titled Do You Love Me Now That I Can Dance to capitalize on the hit. And the Tremeloes decided, this is it. This is our Twist and Shout Part 2.
Now, how did they approach the actual recording of it? Because the Contours version, as we discussed, is so incredibly raw and gritty. Did these British kids try to match that Detroit grit?
They tried to match the energy, absolutely, but they did it in a very uniquely British way. To capture that wild live sound, they used a really specific studio technique where they actually mic'd up a live PA system inside the recording studio.
Wait, explain that to me. I'm not a studio engineer. Like, they played their instruments through live speakers and then recorded the sound coming out of those speakers.
Basically, yes. So normally you'd try to plug directly into the mixing board or use baffles to isolate everything really cleanly so you have control.
Right.
But they wanted it to sound exactly like a loud, sweaty live gig. They wanted that specific beat boom sound, the chaotic sound of a band playing in a cavernous, echoing club.
Oh, like the Cavern Club.
Exactly. So they pumped the vocal and instrument sound into the live room through a PA, and then they placed microphones to record the room itself.
That is actually really clever.
It is clever, and it gave it a huge booming sound. But if you listen to the final results side by side with the Contours, it's still different.
How so?
Well, Andrew Flory, he's a musicologist who has studied this specific era heavily. He calls the Tremeloes version a refined version of a Motown rock song.
Refined is just a polite academic way of saying sanitized, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah. Flory points out that the Tremeloes utilize what he calls pitch and rhythm normalization.
Okay, hold on. Pitch and rhythm normalization sounds like they used auto-tune 50 years before auto-tune was even invented. What were they actually doing with the tape?
Obviously, they didn't have digital plugins, but what it means is that they arranged and performed it to be much tighter.
Ah.
They made absolutely sure the vocal harmonies were perfectly in sync. They made sure the drum beat was completely metronomic and steady. They essentially cleaned off all the Detroit dirt.
Right. The Contours version swings. It's a little loose. It breathes.
Exactly. But the Tremeloes version marches. It is very rigid. It is stereotypical Mersey beat.
It's like the difference between a chaotic street fight and a sanctioned boxing match. One has very strict rules.
That's a great analogy. But, it totally worked for their audience. The British music press loved it. The New Musical Express, the NME, they reviewed the single, and they noted that it was, quote, raucous and a strain on the vocal cords, but ultimately bursting with excitement.
So the Tremeloes have this great cover. But they weren't the only British band eyeing this Contours track.
No, they were not.
And this is the part of the story I just love because it is so petty. Enter the Dave Clark Five.
The legendary DC-5.
There was some serious bad blood here between these bands, wasn't there?
Oh, massive rivalry. See, the Dave Clark Five had actually recorded a version of Twist and Shout a while back. They knew it was a hit, but their record label had completely blocked them from releasing it as a standalone single.
Ouch. That has to hurt.
And then, to make it infinitely worse, they had to sit there and watch Brian Poole and the Tremeloes, and of course the Beatles, have absolutely massive career-making hits with that exact same song.
They must have been furious.
They were. They felt like they had been holding the winning lottery ticket and the label wouldn't let them cash it.
So when Do You Love Me starts making the rounds in the UK?
They were determined not to let history repeat itself. They immediately went in, recorded their own driving version of Do You Love Me, and they had a firm release date set with their label. September 6, 1963.
They were lost and loaded.
They were ready for war.
But the Tremeloes, or at least the executives at Decca, they caught wind of this plan.
The London music industry was very small back then. Word always got out. And this is where we see the aggressive tactic of the rush release.
I feel like rush release is an industry term we hear thrown around a lot.
Right.
But we don't fully appreciate the physical logistics of what that meant.
It was a nightmare.
What does it actually mean to physically rush release a vinyl record in 1963?
It means total panic.
Yeah.
It means you finalize the master tape, you cut the master disc, and someone literally sprints it over to the pressing plant.
Right.
And you tell the foreman at the plant to immediately stop pressing whatever else they were working on, stop printing the new Cliff record, stop printing the jazz records. We need 50,000 copies of this Tremeloes single pressed by tomorrow morning.
Wow.
And then, once they are pressed, you load boxes of them into delivery vans, and you physically drive them as fast as you can to the record shops and the radio stations before the other guys' vans can get there.
It's basically corporate sabotage via vinyl distribution.
It absolutely is. And it worked. Brian Poole and the Tremeloes managed to get their single out to the public on August 31st, 1963.
Wait, August 31st. That is just 1 week before the Dave Clark Five's scheduled release on September 6th.
Just 1 week. But in the singles market, that week was absolutely everything.
Because they got the radio play first.
Exactly. By the time the DC-5 version finally hit the shelves on September 6th, the Tremeloes were already steadily climbing the charts. The teenagers had already spent their pocket money on the Tremeloes record.
So when the dust settled on this battle of the covers, who officially won the war?
In the UK, the Tremeloes won. Decisively.
It wasn't even close.
Not really. Their version shot straight to #1 on all 4 of the major UK music paper charts at the time. It ended up selling 250,000 copies, which earned them a silver disc. It was a massive smash.
And what happened to the poor Dave Clark Five?
They got crushed in the crossfire. Their version peaked way down at number 30 on the record retailer chart.
That's brutal.
Now, it was technically their very first charting single, so it wasn't a total unmitigated failure for them as a band, but they absolutely lost the battle for the coveted #1 spot.
But looking at our research roadmap here, the story has one more geographical twist. Because the Dave Clark Five ultimately got the last laugh, right?
They did, and this is where international geography comes into play. The Tremeloes were huge in the UK, but their sound didn't really translate across the ocean to America.
Right, they never really broke in the U.S.
But the Dave Clark Five, they became absolutely massive in the States. For a brief period, they were seen as the primary rivals to the Beatles in America.
The Tottenham sound versus the Mersey sound.
Exactly. So a bit later on, they decided to release their version of Do You Love Me in America.
Yes, in April of 1964. By this point, they had already hit it huge with Glad all over. They were established stars in America.
So they had leverage.
Right. So they released Do You Love Me in the U.S. and Canada. And guess what? It went all the way to number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100.
So just to recap the sheer madness of this, the exact same song was a massive hit twice by 2 completely different British bands on 2 entirely different continents.
Plus the original million-selling Contours version from Detroit.
It's staggering. If you add it all up, Do You Love Me generated multiple millions of record sales across the globe in a window of just about 18 months.
It's incredible. It really proves that a great song is just a great song, regardless of the marketing, the label, or who can make it.
Though, I have to say, I still deeply prefer the Contours version.
Oh, I think most purists do. There's just something completely undeniable about that original Billy Gordon scream.
It can't be replicated.
Okay, so we've covered the 60s, we've done Motown, we've done the British invasion. By all normal rules of the music industry, the song has had its life. It should be over.
It should have been retired.
It should be one of those oldies that you just hear on AM radio on a lazy Sunday afternoon.
That is usually exactly how it works. The song goes into the vault and stays there.
But then comes the year 1987. And a little independent movie called Dirty Dancing.
Dirty Dancing. I honestly don't think anyone involved predicted just how astronomically big Dirty Dancing was going to be.
It was a pretty low-budget film, wasn't it?
Very low budget. But it caught fire and became this massive cultural phenomenon. And the soundtrack, you could argue the soundtrack was even bigger than the movie itself.
I remember. I feel like everyone's parents had that CD in the car. It was inescapable.
Everyone had it. It sold tens of millions of copies worldwide. And sitting right there on the track list and featured incredibly prominently in the film during a key scene was the Contours' original unmodified 1962 recording of Do You Love Me?
And it was included on the follow-up album too, right?
Yes, on the more Dirty Dancing soundtrack album.
Why did they use the original mono recording? Because by the late 80s, the trendy thing to do in movies was to re-record 60s hits with modern 80s synthesizers and drum machines.
Right, the Phil Collins approach.
Exactly, so why stick with the raw original?
Well, the movie was a strict period piece. It was set very specifically in the summer of 1963 in the Catskills. The director needed that absolute, authentic sonic atmosphere.
It grounds the scene.
It does. And Do You Love Me, with its raw energy, perfectly captures the specific innocence and the wild pre-Beatles American energy of that specific summer.
So the movie comes out, it dominates the box office, the soundtrack blows up. What physically happens to the song?
It starts rapidly climbing the Billboard charts all over again. The label actually reissued it as a physical single.
In 1988.
Yes, in August 1988. 26 years after it was first recorded in the Snake Pit, Do You Love Me re-entered the Billboard Hot 100.
And as we mentioned at the very top of the show, it didn't just scrape into the bottom of the chart at number 99.
No, it surged all the way to number 11.
That is just insane to me. Imagine if a song from, say, 1998 suddenly hit the top 10 today without being remixed.
It's incredibly rare.
I mean, I guess Kate Bush did it recently with Running Up That Hill when it was in Stranger Things.
That is actually the perfect modern comparison. Dirty Dancing was the Stranger Things of the 1980s. It introduced a completely new, massive generation of teenagers to a track they had missed the first time around.
But here is the human side of the story that I really, really love from our research. What did this massive chart resurgence actually mean for the real guys in the Contours? By 1988, these guys must have been, what, in their late 40s or 50s?
At least. And they had been through the absolute ringer of the music industry. The original lineup from 1962 had fractured years ago.
People quit, people moved on.
Exactly. But Joe Billingsley, who we quoted earlier, he was still out there stubbornly keeping the Contours' name alive with 3 new members.
Playing small clubs and casinos, probably.
Playing the oldies circuit, and then suddenly, entirely because of Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey dancing on screen, Billingsley's phone starts ringing off the hook.
They weren't just a dusty nostalgia act anymore. They were literally current chart toppers.
It completely revitalized them. They ended up joining the massive Dirty Dancing tour.
There was a tour.
Oh yeah, a huge arena tour based on the movie's music. The Contours were suddenly playing huge, packed venues again.
Wow.
They toured alongside absolute legends like Ronnie Spector and Bill Medley. It gave these guys a completely unexpected, lucrative second act to their careers.
Now, knowing the record industry, I have to ask, did the label try to officially update the sound of the song to make it fit in more with 1988 radio?
Oh, of course they did. They couldn't help themselves. To capitalize on the sudden hit status, Motown released a second alternate single featuring a, quote, newly remixed version.
Who did the remix?
It was done by a producer named Brian Tankersley, alongside Iris Gordy. They tried to beef it up, make it sound a bit more 80s club friendly.
Let me guess. It wasn't nearly as good.
It just wasn't what people actually wanted. People didn't want a polished 80s dance track. They wanted the 1962 grit. They wanted the history they heard in the movie.
And the song's cultural footprint didn't stop with Dirty Dancing either. It just kept popping up everywhere in pop culture.
It became ubiquitous.
I was a 90s kid, right? And my first real reference point for this song wasn't Dirty Dancing or Motown box set. It was Tiny Toon Adventures.
Oh, the Toon TV episode.
Yes. If you grew up in the early 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There was this whole music video episode in 1992, and Buster Bunny is literally lip-syncing to Billy Gordon's screaming vocals, trying to teach Babs Bunny how to do the dance moves.
It's hilarious, but it just shows the incredible durability of the track. It went from a desperate plea in a tiny Detroit studio to a weapon in a British band rivalry to a romantic Hollywood movie, straight to a Saturday morning cartoon.
And then, jumping forward a bit, you have the legendary funk bassist Bootsy Collins performing it.
Ah, yes.
In 2002.
Right, the incredible documentary, Standing in the Shadows of Motown.
Which was such a beautiful, poignant moment because Bootsy performed it live alongside the surviving members of the Funk Brothers.
It completely closed the historical loop.
It brought the song right back home to the brilliant musicians who originally built its foundation in the Snake Pit. Okay, before we start to wrap this whole deep dive up, we have to acknowledge that because this song is such a fundamental pop standard, literally everyone has tried their hand at covering it over the decades.
So many covers.
We mentioned the big British invasion ones, but there are some really weird, obscure ones hidden in the source metadata that we just have to rapid fire through.
The list is truly endless. Let's see. You have Deep Feeling.
Deep Feeling, right. They were a UK rock band. They took a version of it to number 34 in the UK back in 1970.
And then you have Andy Fraser.
The bass player.
Yes, the former bass player from the legendary classic rock band Free.
The guys who did All Right Now.
Exactly. He actually released a solo version of Do You Love Me in 1984.
How did that do?
It barely registered. It peaked at number 84 on the U.S. charts, a very minor blip.
Okay, what about Duke Basie in 1995?
That one hit number 46 in the UK. It was sort of a reggae pop interpretation, if I recall correctly.
And we can't leave out our German listeners. We have the Preluders in 2004.
The German pop girl group. Their version peaked at number 50 in Germany.
And finally, my absolute personal favorite bizarre discovery, hidden deep in the research notes for today. David Hasselhoff. Apparently, David Hasselhoff released Do You Love Me as a single.
I cannot even imagine what that sounds like.
I haven't heard it either, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure I want to subject myself to it. But the mere fact that it exists out there in the world just mathematically proves that this song is completely inescapable.
It has become a universal musical text. Everyone feels they can interpret it.
So looking back at this incredible timeline, let's bring it all back home. We have gone all the way from a cramped Detroit basement in 1962 to German pop charts in 2004. We've covered gospel choir field trips, Petty Rush releases, and Patrick Swayze.
It's been quite the journey.
What is the ultimate takeaway here from the sources? Why does this specific song survive while thousands of other hits from 1962 are completely forgotten?
I think if we look at the core of it, and the sources support this, the song survives precisely because of its simplicity.
Simplicity?
Yes. It is not trying to be deeply clever. It's not overly intellectual. It is purely about the physical, visceral joy of dancing. The lyrics aren't some deep philosophical treatise.
The resume.
Exactly. It's simply, I can dance, watch me move, now love me.
It takes a physical action and immediately connects it to a deep emotional need.
And that is a timeless, primal human desire. Whether you are doing the twist at a sock hop in 1962, or you're doing whatever the new viral dance challenge is on TikTok today, the core idea of using physical movement to attract a partner is universal. Gordy completely tapped into that primal instinct.
It also totally validates Gordy as a master songwriter, doesn't it? You mentioned earlier that Dave Marsh called him the greatest backstage talent in rock history.
And this song is the absolute undeniable proof of that claim. Gordy understood exactly what the public wanted to hear and feel, even if, as he freely admitted, he couldn't actually get the girls himself because he had 2 left feet. He channeled that genuine, personal, romantic frustration into a piece of music that effectively made the entire world dance. In the grand scheme of things, he definitely won.
He definitely won the war. But, as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought. Something to just chew on after the episode ends.
Let's hear it.
We started this whole deep dive by talking about the accident.
Right, the schedule mix-up.
We talked about how the Temptations were the ones originally supposed to sing this song. And we talked about how the Contours were technically the completely wrong choice.
They were the underdogs. They were rough. They were desperate. They were literally on the verge of being fired.
But think about what that means for modern music. If the Temptations had actually been available that day, if they hadn't skipped out to see the Dixie Hummingbirds, they would have recorded the song perfectly.
They would have hit every note.
Yeah.
Smoothly, beautifully.
And it probably would have been a very nice, polite album track that no one remembers today.
It wouldn't have had the fire.
Exactly. And it makes me think about how the music industry operates today. Today, everything is so data-driven. A&R is driven by algorithms. Vocals are perfectly pitch-corrected. Everything is designed to eliminate mistakes and mitigate risk.
We engineer the accidents out.
Exactly. We are engineering the magic out of the room. If a modern label had a polished boy band ready, they would never, ever let the desperate, failing, gritty band take the track just because they bumped into them in the hallway.
It would never happen today.
But the whole reason Do You Love Me is immortal is because of that failure. The Contours' fear, their gritty, unpolished voices, their desperate need to prove themselves in that tiny room. That was the actual secret ingredient that made the song explode.
The desperation was the fuel that made it a classic.
So maybe the industry's modern obsession with perfection is completely misguided. Because as this song proves, sometimes the totally wrong artist is actually the only right one.
I think you are absolutely right about that. The flaws are what make a human.
Well, thanks for diving deep into the snake pit with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Now, go turn the volume up, find some space in your living room, and see if you can still do the mashed potato.
Just please don't pull a muscle.
Catch you on the next deep dive.